All right. Hello. Good afternoon. Hey, Joe. How are you?
Hi, Sloan. How are you doing?
Great. I feel like I've seen you all day.
I a little bit probably.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you don't know, I will tell you, Joe is running for school board out in Johnston County. And we're bringing this to you. We want to have a conversation for all of you guys because it's very extraordinary. I mean, we know that we're in the primary season, but it's very extraordinary, or maybe not, to have a primary at a school board race. So tell me how this came about, how this works in Johnston County and maybe other counties.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the other counties, but I would assume it's probably, similar. What they do is they look at how many seats are up for that particular cycle, and then they multiply that number by two and add one. And so in our case, there are three seats up, times two is six, plus one is seven, for those of you following along at home. And if there's at least seven people running, then they have to have a primary. In our case in Johnston County, which has made, I would say, at least statewide news, but possibly national news as well, we have 13 individuals running for these three seats. There are three people that are up for re-election. Two of them have decided not to run. The only one that is still running is an incumbent who was never elected. His name is Al Bird, and he was appointed about a year and 2 months ago when somebody resigned. So it's really a completely wide open race, but that's why we have a primary and for Board of Education, and 6 people get through the primary. If you're in Johnston County and you're going to vote, you can vote for up to 3 of those 6 people, but you don't have to vote for 3. I'll talk about that later as well, but that's, I think, a brief rundown of why we have a primary for Board of Education. It's also, it should be pointed out, we don't run for specific seats. It is a complete county-wide election. There are no districts or districting in the Board of Education for Johnston County, which is kind of odd. So you can literally have 7 people on the board that are from one community, and the rest of the county isn't represented at all, which is the main reason that I'm running, because I don't think there's representation.
That's very different from what we see in Wake and Mecklenburg County, for instance, where they're all different. They're segregated into different districts. So that makes total sense. So let me tell you now why the primary is so important. So we're expecting a red wave. That is what's been predicted. It's conventional logic. So if that's true, it makes a lot of difference who we send into these spots. Not all Republicans are created the same. Joe, you said something like not all Republicans
Not
are Republican.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and the other reason the primaries are so important, especially in red-leaning counties, is typically whoever gets through is going to win the actual general election, and you're using a much smaller voting sample to decide who these people are in the primary, where, we're expecting obviously more people to come out for the general election. Well, it's kind of already been decided to some extent on some of these races in the primary with a much smaller voting sample. I can tell you, I've been out at the polls every single day, and it is lackluster to say the least. It started April 28th, which was a Thursday, and then April 29th, Friday, and then all of last week. So that's 7 days. I think we had about 3,300 voters, somewhere in that vicinity. So, I mean, you're talking about what, 500 voters a day, a little under that, in the entire county. And you're basically allowing a very small number of people to decide for you who is going to represent you. So people need to be aware of that and why they need to get out. And I'm not saying specifically early voting. I'm personally against a lot of forms of early voting.
Yeah.
But my goodness, please come out on May 17th and vote if you're not doing early voting.
So next Tuesday, that'd be next Tuesday. So,
Yeah.
A lot of the policies that we have that are school related, yes, they can be taken care of at the school board level, but also at the state level. So you've got some races there. You've got a guy named Rick Walker, who is challenging the longtime incumbent, I believe a 4-term North Carolina House member by the name of Donna White. You've got a Superior Court judge seat that actually just was created, and it's in Johnston County. Monumentally important race. And so you've got a guy named Paul Holcomb, which we back. totally back. And then you've got his challenger. So Paul Holcomb is another name to watch. In particular, if you, whoops, I shared that. In particular, if you know, you may have to sue the school district or what have you. We don't want to, now that you're going to be on the board, Joe, but if you have to do that, the Superior Court judge is who you'll be in front of. You want to make sure that there's a good education, family-minded judge. That would be Paul Holcomb. And so, you know, getting out of the primaries is important. As you said, very low turnout. The last day of early voting will be Saturday early voting. And then at the primaries, you have to make it. So in your county, we're kind of predicting 20,000. Based on what you've seen, you've been at all the polls. Is that even feasible?
If there's a turnout on the 17th, next Tuesday, yes. But I would say if the average continues of 500 to 600 people a day, I mean, you're talking about maybe another 2,500 to 3,000 this week. So, you know, now we're at 6,000 to 7,000. So we would need 13,000 people to show up next Tuesday. And just for the people that might be watching from Johnston County, if you don't know, there are 4 voting locations. There is the church at Clayton Crossings, right across the street from the First Baptist Church in Smithfield, C3 Church, if you're noticing a trend here, and then the Archers Lodge Community Center, which is right across from a big church in Archers Lodge. So those 4 locations will take anybody from the county and allow them to vote. You don't have to go to your specific precinct. If you vote early, you can come out and vote. They'll accept you, and you know, as you know, you don't have to show an ID and all of that stuff, but you will be able to vote. But yeah, the numbers are extremely low. I did want to point out something. You mentioned Rick Walker and Paul Holcomb. Both of them were at the Church of Clayton Crossings for most of the day today. So the candidates are out. If you actually want to go and talk to a candidate, I know that's what everybody wants to go out and do.
Yeah.
But if you actually want to go and meet a candidate, believe me, we are out at the polls. I apologize that we might bombard you because there's so many of us, but that's just how slow it is. There's only 1 or 2 people coming in every 10 or 15 minutes. And we're just standing there all day. We've got nothing else to do but to try to come and talk to you and give you our literature and maybe, you know, just get you to know a little bit about us. But hopefully you are doing your own research before you even go to the poll. You really need to do your own research, figure out who you actually, you know, want to vote for because you align with their values and beliefs. Don't just go to the polls and just randomly vote for people. That doesn't help anybody. Be educated, educate yourself, do your own research.
Yeah, you have to. And guys, it's really kind of simple to do that. Your county makes it very simple. Go to whatever county you're in. The Board of Ed has its own website. And then check up and see, there'll be a simple ballot. Look at that ballot and look the people up. What we do is we do a social media search going back 1-2 years. We also look at the voting records. You know, you can check that out. So if, you know, Joe Preston, I'll look him up and I'm going to find, wow, Joe, he was a Republican, you know, voted in the primaries and voted in the general, et cetera. So find that out because, Joe, we're seeing a lot of candidates, a lot more than I would like to say, who were registered Democrats until, I don't know, 15 minutes ago, because again, it's a favorable election for Republicans. And so that brings out some, what we call rhinos, Republicans in name only. In other words, Democrats. Are you seeing any of that?
Yes, there's some in my particular race. There's some in some other races, but you just said something very important about the sample ballots. I think that's the most effective way you can really start to educate yourself is if you go in the board, it's right there on the main page, right in the middle, sample ballot. You can click on where you live and, you know, how you're registered or whatever. It'll give you your exact sample ballot. It'll tell you exactly who's on the ballot. And then you can go look those people up. You're probably going to have an opinion on 1 or 2 races, but you might not know anything about the Superior Court judge race, you know, that she was just, you know, mentioning. So that sample ballot is a very effective tool. And then do your research. Pick your people on that sample ballot and walk that with you when you go vote, because when you go vote, you're going to have a lot of people try to hand out their stuff to you. And you're also going to have some what I would call nefarious groups trying to hand out voting guides to you as well. And the last thing I think any of us need is somebody else deciding for you, the individual, who you should vote for. I don't agree with a lot of things, and one of them is voting guides. I just, it doesn't make sense. There's one in particular that's this little yellow square card. It's called the Conservative Voting Guide, and it is not at all that. I'm not saying that some of the people on there aren't conservative, but it is definitely not.
You still have to do your
a
homework.
complete
Yeah.
conservative voting guide. Do your homework. And
Yes.
there's Paul.
There's Paul. Yeah, 14 years on the bench already, as you pointed out. Johnston County has voted for this fine judge for four terms, right? So we want to reelect him. But what I love about Paul is that he, in his statement, in his interview with us, I mean, parental rights, big time, taking the side of the child over the government. You cannot have judges that are so enmeshed in the system. They're a rubber stamp for the government to do whatever it wants. We saw this with the mandates. We saw, and this is a terrible thing. We saw this with opening the schools in general. Paul is the guy to get it done. He's the only experienced judge in this race. This is a race that determines who's going to sit on the Superior Court for 8 years. It's a very significant term, guys. 8 years.
Yeah, 8 years is a long time, and you actually shared something with me that I was unaware of, that he would be the person that if we had some sort of lawsuit or case with the school board, that he would be the person that we would go to. I can't tell you how important that is. There's literally a report that came out on the JOCO report today regarding a student that had a 4-year-old student in one of our schools that was being abused by a teacher. Smacked across the face, assault, and it happened, I believe, in February, and it's now just being reported because the school system told the father, well, we don't usually report these things unless there are visible marks, or if the student says something. I'll share this with you after the call, Sloan. I read it a half hour ago. It's a big breaking story. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, she literally says it's a general rule that we don't report these things unless there's actual visible marks. I mean, it's quoted. And this is a 4-year-old, preschool student being assaulted by a really bad teacher. And I'm not saying this is a blanket statement on teachers. I love teachers. I mean, my wife is a teacher. Love teachers.
In every profession.
But there's a very bad apple, bad apple here. And she was asked to resign. But I guess now that it's coming out, there's now criminal charges against this person, thank goodness. But that's why we need somebody good. And as you know, I'm not doing any endorsements. I'm running my own campaign. But Paul seems to be a very capable and good individual. And I see him daily, and I see his wife daily. They're out there campaigning their butts off. So if you want to meet the guy, just go to one of these polling stations. You'll probably see either him or his wife. We're out there all day, every day. And it's so fun.
Wow. Got that, everybody. It's so fun. So I want to leave everybody with this. This is a very, Johnston County there's a lot important going on. And there's a lot of you out there that have not gotten involved in campaigns yet. We're meeting at 9 a.m. TBA to be assessed.
Announced.
Thank you. To be announced or determined, right, D? We're going to meet at 9. We're going to have some donut holes. We're going to have some coffee. And then we're going to go door knocking. We're going to hit 3,000 doors. 3,000 doors on Saturday. There's going to be 50 of us. We want you to join us. edfirstnc.org. Click events, register. edfirstnc.org. We want to see you out there. There's going to be stuff to do for the kids before we leave, etc. I'm bringing my kids with me. And we want to see you out there. So edfirstnc.org, click events. We got to knock doors for Joe. We got to knock doors for Rick, and we got to knock for Paul, for April. So there's a lot of great candidates running that will come out of Johnston County and will represent the entire state. So we need you in there. We need you helping. Absolutely.
I'll be out there. I believe my wife and daughter are going to be out there as well. So we got a couple other volunteers that I'm bringing. So I'm not going to promise you guys that it's going to be a good time. I mean, walking around, knocking on doors isn't always the most fun, but it's so important. This is so important that we get the right people
A
in
lot of
office.
fun.
And the primary, as you were saying before, especially in a county like Johnston County, it's more important than the general. I mean,
Definitely.
this is less people voting, deciding for what's going to happen in November. And if we don't have the right people voting, if that makes sense,
Yep.
we've got to get the right people out there to vote, because it's such a small sample that's going to be voting. So really would love to see you guys out there and understand the importance that there is. Some of you might not even know that there is a primary election, especially for Board of Education. But there is, and it's extremely, extremely important. So Sloan, thank you for having me on, as always.
Thank you.
Appreciate talking to you and your support.
Thank you.
Let me know what else I can do.
Okay. All right. Sounds